Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to Monmouthshire County Council's Governor's Audit Committee meeting for October. We'll get right on the agenda, starting with item 1, which is apologies for absence. I've been notified of one absence, that's Sarah Birch. Otherwise, I think we're all present and correct. Moving on to item 2. Item 2 is declarations of interest. May I ask members to highlight any declarations of interest to make at this point, please? No? Okay, in which case we shall move on to item 3. Item 3 is a public open forum. This is the opportunity for members of the public to make written or oral representations to this committee on relevant matters. I've not been advised of any, and indeed there are no members of the public present. In which case we can move on to item 4. Item 4 is our action list. We have 3 actions. If I quickly look at items 1 and 2, I see those 2 items are on the agenda for today's meeting and therefore are closed. And in respect of item 3, I note that Deputy Chief Executive Peter Davis is not present at today's meeting. So can I just check with my colleague Colin Prosser that he's satisfied with the email response he had from Peter some time ago, please? Colin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I am satisfied. I think that the procurement process and ensuring that small and medium-sized businesses in Monmouthshire are supported is a work in progress. So I would suggest that the committee should maintain an interest in that and then review those structures when they're available for us as appropriate to governance and audit.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Duly noted. We shall do that. Okay, given the fact that our head of finance, John Davis, needs to leave the meeting at 3:15, what I'm suggesting is that we have a minor shuffle about of the agenda. So what I'm proposing is that we now take items 8 and 9 next. Item 8 is the Monmouthshire County Council Statement of Accounts for the last financial year, and item 9 is the Audit Wales audit of the accounts report. We'll take both items together in that I'll initially ask John to speak to the Statement of Accounts item, for him to talk us through his cover paper and then the annual accounts as he sees fit. I'll then hand over to Steve Wyndham and Julie Owens from Audit Wales to briefly outline their report into the accounts and then go to members for questions and comments. Hopefully that makes sense for people. So John, over to you please to introduce the Statement of Accounts.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. The item coming forward is the audited statement of accounts, and the Audit Wales report following their audit process is also within the papers. I think in terms of general reflections on the process, it has gone quite smoothly this year. We're a full 4 weeks ahead of where we were in the previous financial year, coming forward to committee, which is really pleasing. It means hopefully we can draw a line under the 24-25 financial year and move on with our work for this year and next. I think what's been clear again this year from our perspective is that supportive approach of Audit Wales. I think with Steve Wyndham coming onto the team, that's been quite a smooth transition, and his support in particular has been welcomed throughout the process. It's been a time of through the summer of where some teams were taking leave, which is to be expected. But I think Audit Wales have accommodated that and worked quite flexibly with us, so that's been really appreciated. The audit report itself, I think, is overall a positive one. Once again, it's an unqualified opinion on our financial statements. Nevertheless, I think I'm disappointed with some of the areas that have been found through the testing. There will always be errors. and I think we need to appreciate that. But I think some of them were probably more manual error, an input error this time around, which I would have hoped that a quality assurance process would have picked up. So I think we need to reflect on that. We will have bolstered capacity within the team for the 25-26 process, which will help us and will aid in that QA process. I think ultimately, it's a balance of bringing together a set of accounts that is timely, and I think we need to do that, and we need to still maintain that, but also having a level of quality that is acceptable. And I think we've got that overall. I think the issues found don't suggest that there's fundamental errors here within the statements. I think broadly they're of good quality, and those errors found are immaterial, as the audit report outlines. I'm sure Steve will come on to. The final thing to note for members of the committee is that the audit process, as we know, is a live process until it's signed off, hopefully at the end of this week. There were two areas and errors found within the report that are not currently reflected in the papers today. That was a slight oversight on our part, and the updated version will be the one that goes forward to be signed by relevant officers and also by Audit Wales. Just to note for committee what those two areas are that have been adjusted since the papers were circulated. There was an error found of £1,189,000 that was a misclassification within the balance sheet. That means that it's being moved from our cost of services income down to taxation and grant income. Purely a misclassification within the balance sheet, but that is not currently shown in the version you have in front of you today. The final one then is in terms of debtors, and it was a £350,000 error that was found where grant income had not been accrued correctly within the accounts. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, that was excluded from the papers you have in front of you today, but it has been adjusted and will be in the version that comes forward for signing this week. So I think, Chair, that's broadly where we are. I think really positive message overall in terms of that timing of it coming forward and the audit process being 4 weeks earlier, and I think broadly a quality set of accounts which the audit report outlines. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, could I now go to Steve Wyndham and Julie Owens to introduce their paper, which is the report into the annual accounts, and also, if you deem appropriate, to pick up on some of John's points. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll take you through the content of the report, and Julie and myself will help address any questions you might have, but I'll certainly kick things off anyway. Yeah, I'm pleased first of all to bring our audit report to this committee today, and it will inform your decision as to whether to approve the financial statements for 24-25. The key headline, the main message in the report, it is quite a long report, but the main message is that we've completed our audit work, all of our audit work, and we intend to issue an unqualified opinion on those accounts, subject to their approval, of course. But before I go into the detail of the report, I'd like also to take the opportunity, probably before I forget, to thank the council and especially John and the team really for the support and good engagement we experienced which enabled us to complete the audit and bring the report to you in good time for today. So thank you. Going to the main body of the report, I'll refer to the page numbers, and when I refer to the page numbers, I refer to the pages of our report as opposed to those in the pack. So I hope that's okay. But regardless, I think what I'm talking about should draw out the content of what I'm referring to. But I'll start on page 5 of the report, of our report, because that provides quite a succinct overview, I feel, of the main messages within the report, in that, number one, it's an unqualified opinion we intend to give. Number two, there are some uncorrected misstatements, but they're not material to our opinion. I'll cover each of these in a bit more detail shortly, by the way. And the third key point there is that there is one other issue to bring to your attention, which I'll come on to shortly, which relates to not so much an error, I guess, or anything of that sort of magnitude in regard to the accounts. It's more of a judgment that we have made to support our audit, but I'll talk about that in a moment. And then fourthly, our intention to certify your accounts tomorrow, following approval, which is within deadline. And that's an important point, really, because not all councils are in that position. The deadline is tomorrow, the 31st of October. A number of councils, the number of which escapes me, I'm sorry, but there are a significant minority who aren't in that position of completing their audit by the deadline. So thank you again, John and the team, for helping us achieve that deadline. If I move on to page 6, very briefly, because that confirms our level of materiality, which you will see on there, of £3.9 million. And why that's important is on page 7, we refer to a small number, 2 misstatements, in fact, that were identified from our audit work that remain uncorrected. So these are 2 issues we identified that aren't corrected in the financial statements being put for approval today. And those 2 errors relate to an understatement in regard to the right of use assets in regard to IFRS 16, lease accounting, which is a new area this year. So many councils are experiencing difficulties with this area of the accounts. But there's an understatement there of £1.7 million. It sounds a significant figure, but in the context of our materiality figure, it's clearly below that. And the next uncorrected error relates to an overstatement of some property assets, and that's just over £250,000. So both individually and in aggregate, they are lower than our 3.9 million materiality level, and therefore they have no impact whatsoever on our audit opinion. But they are being reported to you today for your own awareness and to inform, I guess, your approval process and whether you are content that the accounts aren't amended for those particular reasons, for those particular misstatements, rather. There are also, which John rightly alluded to, a number of other corrected misstatements within the financial statements, and these are set out in Appendix 2, which I will turn to shortly. As John mentioned, they have been agreed with management and they have been adjusted for in the final accounts, which are reviewed this afternoon. If I move on to page 8 of our report, this is in reference now to that other significant matter I referred to. Now, when we talk about significant matters, this is language really from auditing standards. You might judge it not to be that significant, but we've decided to report this area within this part of the report. But anyway, in terms of the detail here, it's just given us the opportunity really to explain that the consolidation process within the accounts for the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, otherwise known as, or formerly known as the Cardiff City deal, it gives us the opportunity to explain some of that and some of the judgments we made. It's for information only, really, and what it does communicate is that the Joint Committee's accounts, the City Deals accounts for 24-25, do actually remain uncertified as we stand today. But we are the auditors of the Joint Committee, and we've received internal assurances that sufficient audit work has been undertaken on those accounts, and also that no significant matters have arisen. So we've obtained assurance that the consolidation of those figures within the Monmouthshire's accounts is materially correct. So that is purely a means, I guess, of communicating that to you. So it's an important point to us, but it's it might not be significant in your own personal opinions. If I move on to the appendices, then there's 4 of which. Appendix 1 sets out the audit risks, which we communicated in our original audit plan, which came to this committee earlier in the year. But it also sets out the outcomes and the conclusions we had on each of those risk areas. And so, in a way, those risks set out how we perceive, these are some key areas for our audit, and now we're reporting back to you what was the outcome of those, or our audit of those key areas. It's for information, really, but hopefully you find it helpful. But you will see, I think, that we found issues of varying magnitude across the majority of those risk areas, which is set out within that appendix. But again, it's for information. Appendix 2 provides a summary of the adjustments made to the draft accounts as a result of our audit work. There's quite a number there, but I don't intend to cover these in great detail. But what I will say, some of them are material, although I can confirm that the vast majority of the amendments, and including the material amendments, are of a presentational, disclosure, or a classification nature. In other words, they don't affect the bottom line of the council. There's no impact on council reserves or council balances, apart from one, and that's the issue which John referred to, which was the impact of the grant income being misclassified. It was originally posted to 25-26 financial year, but our audit work determined that it should have been in 24-25 financial year. So it's very much simply a timing issue. Does it, as far as the council, it was in 25-26, but now it's in 24-25. So whilst this had an impact on the bottom line, as I say, it is simply a timing issue. I'll move on to Appendix 3. I'd be happy to take any questions, by the way, on Appendix 2. Appendix 3 confirms our audit opinion in terms of it being an unqualified opinion. So that's a copy of that opinion there for you for information. And Appendix 4, finally, is the letter of representation. Now, this is it's included in the report, which you would have seen in previous reports from us at this stage. But it is an important appendix because we need this to support the account certification process. It's the representations from this committee and the council that the accounts are robust and intact, and there's no issues that haven't been raised that we need to be aware of. So I'll stop there, but very happy to take any questions you might have, either on what I've said or on the content of the report.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, John. There's quite a lot to unpack there. I'll go to members first for their questions and observations. Start with Phil, please.
Just one, nothing epic, but one for John. You've done everything 4 weeks quicker this year. I know there's a general view in Welsh Government that it's got to be quicker again. Do you need to be quicker again this year? And if so, are you happy that you're going to be able to achieve that? And the other thing is, you were clearly worried, tried to make light of it, but clearly worried about some of the relatively minor things. Is there anything which is niggling at you in that you perhaps are not quite sure how you're going to stop them from happening next time?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Murphy. I think on the first point, I think clearly the deadlines are set out in legislation from Welsh Government. That is to deliver an audited set of accounts by the end of July, which is a challenging ask, even with the best resourced of teams and audit teams. I think there is probably a discussion ongoing within Welsh Government around whether that remains viable in the current local government context. So, I'm not looking for significant changes as we go into 25, 26. Certainly, we'll be trying to make some improvements in providing that draft accounts slightly earlier to Audit Wales. But we will have to have a conversation around how that audit process looks, whether we can make any further adjustments to it to bring the timeline back for 25, 26. I think, as I touched upon in the introduction, Councillor Murphy, it's a balance, I think, between bringing them in a timely manner and having them at an appropriate level of quality. What I wouldn't want to get into a position of is just bringing them forward for forward's sake, and that impacting upon the quality of the accounts that we're handing over. So I think that's a discussion we need to have, and we're in close contact with Audit Wales around that and we will be for our pre-planning for 25, 26. So we'll take that in the round as it comes. In terms of some of those issues that have been found, I think it's tough sometimes as a finance professional trying to move away from 100% perfection. But I think we have to be cognizant that there will always be errors in a document that's over 100 pages, that's bringing in thousands of individual transactions. So I think firstly we just need to accept that. What I'm probably less accepting of is just some of the I guess manual input errors, human error that can and should be picked up through a quality assurance process. So I think that's where our focus needs to lie. Are those assurance processes robust enough? And clearly they've been picked up by audit through a process they've gone through, albeit that's over 2 or 3 months, and we're not going to be able to put that level of work into it. But we just need to go back and have a look at our QA processes to see if there's things that we can put in place, controls that we can put in place to flag some of these things. So that's where the focus is going to be.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you. I'll go to Tony next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Back on your appendix, on Appendix 2, there's about £12 million there as I added up, but you don't seem to see that many of them are significant. But can I ask a question about the pension fund liability? Just under £5 million, what proportion of that is with the actual pension fund? Is it significant? Is there any clawback problem if it's not dealt with properly within the pension fund liability? Because that's a legal aspect, isn't it? Does that make sense to my question? Not look at.
I think it's a question for John. Yes, John.
Well, John. Yeah, John. Yeah, I think it's that with John.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one firstly, Councillor Eason, and I'm sure Steve can come or Judy can come in if we need further support, which I may do. This is obviously a technical area, Councillor Eason. I think just to be clear initially, there's no impact here on our funding position for the pension fund. This is purely a presentational adjustment through what we term an asset ceiling adjustment. So just to kind of try and explain that in simple terms, we cannot, as a council, present a pension fund surplus or asset in our balance sheet. We wouldn't be able to access any surplus because those funds belong not to us, but to the pension fund, to the members. The only way we'd be able to affect that surplus is through reduced contributions to the fund in the future. So that is why a pension fund surplus that was confirmed by the actuary has turned into an actual net liability on our balance sheet because we can't recognise a lot of that that surplus asset. That's a very technical adjustment, and it's much more complex than that. And I'm glad I didn't have to do that work, and the team's really done that well. What did happen, and as was picked up through the audit, was a small element of that adjustment wasn't classified properly, and the overall liability had to be adjusted by that amount that is in the appendix, which I'm not looking at, but is around £4.9 million. So just to reiterate, that doesn't impact at all on our funding position of the pension fund. This is purely presentational in our balance sheet.
Okay. Any more questions or comments, please? I'm not seeing any hands raised. So if I may make some general observations and then go to more detailed questions. We mustn't lose sight of the real positives here. We have an unqualified audit opinion and a set of accounts which have been finalised in good time. So I think it's only right and proper this committee expresses its gratitude to John and the team for the great work they've done over a prolonged period. So well done, John. Also as well, we should congratulate Audit Wales, not only for the high quality and diligent work they've completed in respect of auditing our accounts, but the way they've gone about it. We've heard about the very positive relationship between Audit Wales and the finance team, and that's something to be applauded, because I certainly recognise the pressure both the finance team and Audit Wales have been under, and we have come through this with a great result. So well done. Please pass on my thanks and this committee's thanks to all involved. If I could then just move on to some more detailed points. And the first question, from my understanding, Steve, when he talked about the Appendix 2 of his report, he drew our attention to a misallocation or misclassification of grant income, a figure which, if I'm correct, it was totalled £1,189,000. Is that the same figure, John, that you've alluded to in your introduction, which are not being fully adjusted in the accounts we have in front of us?
That's correct, Chair. That is one and the same issue. Yeah.
Okay. A minor niggle. Could you set out why then? Because you have the information on this need for an adjustment that hasn't been recorded. Is that back to some deficiencies in your QA process you referred to?
So this was an issue that was picked up through the course of the audit. The adjustment that was required within the papers that you've had today wasn't processed. It was partially processed within one of the notes, but it wasn't processed on the face of the balance sheet. That was largely due, I think, due to the amount of work that was needed to restate a lot of the CJC adjustments. So Steve talked through those adjustments. There was a lot of work within that. So the team were focused on that and also had to adjust those other areas that Steve went through in Appendix 2, probably within the space of a few days. And unfortunately, one of them wasn't processed fully. So that's the reason, Chair, why that isn't showing fully within the version in the pack today.
Okay, thank you. I'm content with that explanation. I understand the context, so thank you. You're working in a very compressed timescale to complete a number of adjustments. Okay. And just a question for Steve. Just you did mention this, but I didn't quite catch the date. When are we expecting the Auditor General for Wales to certify these accounts, please?
Yeah, that is in fact tomorrow. The precise time being, just for the record, really, 2:00. So tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, thank you. We like precision sometimes. Okay.
We all do.
Okay, and for the Auditor General to do that, does he need a final set of accounts?
does. There's two things we require from the council. One is a signed version of the final accounts, which subject to your approval, of course, and also the signed letter of representation. And the other thing which informs that, I'll be contacting Peter Davis as the Section 151 officer of the council to obtain assurances that, I know this might sound overkill, but it's a necessary step. Obtain assurances that nothing has occurred since the date of approval, which is today, and up until the date of certification tomorrow. So there's a few more little hoops to jump through, but that would be it, if I can put it that way. We're very nearly there in terms of completing the audit.
Good. Okay. And I appreciate I'm getting in some detail here, but I do need help from John here. Okay, so John, the two final adjustments you need to make, will they be made available to Audit Wales before 2 o'clock tomorrow?
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just to confirm, that final set of accounts was sent to Audit Wales at the end of last week. Unfortunately, that was just after we'd circulated the papers for this committee. I chose not to recirculate papers early this week, which I think would have muddied the waters, and that version will be the one that comes for signing later today by yourself as chair of the audit committee, should those be endorsed today, and will be signed off by Peter in his capacity as 151 as well. So that is where we will go this afternoon to get that over the line.
Thank you. If I was missing information I needed, I didn't appreciate that the final set of accounts have been already forwarded to Audit Wales. So it's just a timing issue in relation to the publication of papers for this committee meeting. That's really helpful and gives me a lot more comfort. Steve, do you want to come in?
It's just to confirm that, Chair, really, that we have received the accounts, and not only that, we've checked them and we're happy with them. So provided the signed version we actually have matches that version, we're good to go. So.
Excellent. Okay, we are nearly there. One minor point, and you may know this, Steve, but I understand Peter Davis is on leave. Have we contingency in place, John?
We have. We've had that discussion, and we'll work around that as necessary today, Chair.
Fantastic. Okay. All lights are green. Okay. Committee members, we're being asked to do two things. We're being asked to review and, as appropriate, approve the set of accounts. Think of phraseology. Okay. Approve the set of accounts, noting that there are two minor adjustments to be made, which will be available to me. And then secondly, for you to authorise me to sign the letter of representation to submit to the Auditor General for Wales. I'm not going to take a formal vote, but I'm happy to hear any contrary voices. No? Okay. In which case, the committee approves those accounts and authorises me to sign that letter of representation and to submit to the Auditor General for Wales in accordance with timescales as set out. So once again, thank you, John and the team. Thank you, Steve and Julie. Your work in this regard is much appreciated. Thank you. Okay. If we could now go back to the agenda, please, and back to item 5. Item 5 is the call-in of the Chief Officer for Social Care, Safeguarding and Accessible Health Services in response to the MyMate Internal Audit Report. And I believe the officers are outside, so they'll join us in a few moments. Okay, so great. Okay, good afternoon. We can now move on to item 5. Item 5 is for calling of the Chief Officer for Social Care and colleagues to address the findings as set out in the MyMate internal audit report we considered at our last meeting. So could I welcome Jane Rogers, Strategic Director for Social Care and Safeguarding, Jenny Jenkins, Head of Adult Services, and Claire Morgan, Service Manager for Mental Health and Disability. Many thanks for taking the time to attend this meeting. It's much appreciated. I note you have some slides to run through in a moment, but may I suggest that we ask Jan Furtek, our Chief Internal Auditor, just to contextualise this agenda item by referencing the audit report, setting out the key themes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so during the Governance and Audit Committee on the 11th of September 25, within my 2025-26 Quarter 1 update report, I brought to the committee's attention that an unfavourable opinion of limited assurance had been issued for the planned internal audit review of the MyMate service. Following consideration of the findings, the committee requested the attendance of senior officers at their meeting today to discuss how the situation had arisen and what was being done to address the issues raised with a view to providing the required level of assurance that matters would be appropriately dealt with. So Appendix A of the cover report shows a summary of the issues that were raised within the internal audit report, the recommendations issued, and the agreed management actions. So it's the internal audit team's intention to complete a follow-up review of the MyMate service during the 26-27 financial year, and the outcome of this follow-up review will be reported to the committee in due course. So I'll hand over to the Head of Adult Services to provide some further information and to hopefully answer any questions that committee members may have.
Thank you, Anne. So I've only got a few slides. I'm just going to very briefly run through them. The first part of the slide is just to give you a very brief history of the service. I'm not going to go through every bullet point on the slide, but just to contextualise, the service has been in place since 2016. It's funded through RIF, which is grant funding. And it's an early intervention and prevention model that sits outside our statutory provision. We also host the arrangement on behalf of the 5 Gwent local authorities, so it operates on a regional footprint. So just to go straight to the audit findings and the actions to date, I mean, the very high-level run-through of the main issues here. The first aspect was in relation to finance and around the cash that was being handled by the staff. So we've stopped doing that now, and we're looking at a card reader solution for the very rare instances when cash will need to be handled. We've brought the expenses in line with the wider MCC policy. We've stopped weekend working and loan working, and we have robust budget management and oversight procedures in place. The staff contracts was raised in the report as being an issue of concern. The staff are now on permanent contracts, although we are missing a manager. The manager has left the service. So we have made different arrangements around management. I'll move on to that in a moment. I think one of the main issues of concern is around safeguarding and risk management that was brought up in the report. So as previously mentioned, we've stopped the loan working. Our staff are well trained in safeguarding procedures, and we are linked into the wider safeguarding processes within adult services. We're keeping a report of all the issues relating to safeguarding in a central file, and they're subject now to regular review. In terms of ongoing work and next steps, the MyMate service has been brought under the management of the Community Learning Disability team manager and the service manager for mental health and disability, who's Claire, because there is an alignment with our My Support service, and we felt that that was, in the absence of the manager, we felt that there was that was a good arrangement to ensure that the service was had proper oversight and supervision. The team receive regular support and one-to-one sessions. All their training has been updated and their individual training plans are in place. In terms of what happens next, as mentioned previously, the service is a regional one. So we are liaising with our local authority colleagues and looking at how we move forward with the service in the future. The other thing to note as well is that because it's grant funding, we're not entirely certain of the continuation of the funding for this service. So we have to take the sustainability of the service and the future model into consideration when we review the risk of losing that funding that we currently receive. Very high level, but any questions?
So thank you. We'll go to Phil first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I say first of all that I think MyMate is a fabulous service. You know, I've always held it in high regard, and I can see from here what you're doing about correcting all of the bits and pieces of that. My question is, how on earth did we get to that position in the first place? You know, there's obvious safeguarding issues, there's financial issues, there's you can just about say that there appears, I'm only going on what it says here, but there appears to have been a total lack of control. Now that's probably probably putting it far too high, but you know, that's how it appears, and I think that's how it would appear to anybody externally looking at it. So, you know, I'd like some sort of idea about how we got to the position where Jan and his team found all of these things.
Is it going? Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy. Yes, I mean, take your question very seriously. I mean, the history of the service is one that's, you know, it's quite an unusual service, and it was, I suppose, conceived of and developed in quite a different, you know, in quite a different space within the local authority and what the expectations are. You know, there has been a manager in place. That manager's left. That gave us the opportunity to have a much deeper look into the service. We were keen for IA to help us with that as well. And I think your statement around, you know, there was no controls. I think it probably is that it's an unusual service. I need to come back to that. It was very much the emphasis on trying to make sure that it had the freedom to be user-led, to be creative, to be innovative. But we've lost the balance along the way with upholding those values, but at the same time making sure that the proper controls and safety measures and the way things were organised are in place. And I think that balance just slipped off. And once it slipped off quite quickly, especially then with a period of absence of the manager, and now subsequently there was a manager leaving. So it has been the opportunity to really give it that good deep dive view and get it back on track and back in balance, not losing the heart of the service, but making sure we have got the right systems and processes in place. And I think when it shifted from a local to a regional, with the RIF funding, we probably should have done more to make sure we retain that sort of local oversight and control. The oversight was coming through the regional arrangements, but we probably just let it slip in terms of making sure we had that local control as well, which is what we're trying to correct now.
This is the manager who was on long-term sick and has now subsequently left, is it?
Just to follow up with what Jane was saying there, though, there was some oversight, but it was regionally. So every quarter we do have to report into RIF so that they're aware of what we're spending the money on and the activity, and it's how it's meeting people's outcomes. So there were regular reports going in, and when the manager was off, then it was picked up by the team. So there has been some oversight, but as Jane said, it's not been local up till now. But yeah, it's come in-house a bit more now.
Well, I can see that there's been great strides in preventing it from happening again, and good luck with that. They certainly seem to be along the right tracks, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
Good, thank you. Could we go to Rodri next, please?
Thanks, Chair. One of the weaknesses talks about member application forms, and I can see you've got a digital solution going forward, but I was wondering, have you done a review of the existing members to ensure that the same kind of information that was captured then has been considered now?
We are going to be reviewing everybody, the membership, definitely. There was an eligibility criteria. I think that's got a bit muddy. So from now on, we will be strict with the eligibility criteria. And one of the things that we've built in now is that we will be checking against the health database to make sure that people are eligible for the service. But yeah, we're actually going to be looking at everybody who attends, because there's a large membership, but actually not everybody does attend. So we haven't yet started this, but we're going to be looking at who actually does attend, and as far as the membership database is concerned, does everybody who's originally signed up still want to be on that database?
Yeah, that's helpful. You actually touched on one of my later questions I had around that, which is around the eligibility criteria. And obviously, you say you're looking at. Have you got timescales for then when that will be finalised and rolled out?
So, from an eligibility point of view, we're working on that now so that we can get a consent aspect into the form, because obviously we can't look into people's health records until we've got their consent. So that's now being built into the form.
Great. Come another one. Okay. You also talk about mandatory training, and the team have been informed and told to do that. Has that been undertaken yet? And if not, when and how are you going to ensure that members are doing it?
We put a timescale on that, and they have now all done their mandatory training. It's all up to date. It's all recorded on our IT system so that the managers can go in and make sure that they have got their training up to date now.
Thank you. Let's go to Tony, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This service started around about 2016, I think. Did it start off in an ad hoc way which allowed points that Roger making that the members of it weren't really monitored ongoing into the future, and as a position we've got to now, it became fragmented, and we've got to get the fragmentation back into an organised system of control.
I think when it was set up, I don't think it was necessarily ad hoc.
I use that word broadly.
Yeah, but it was never meant to be like a statutory service. Yeah. So it was member led, and people could self-refer into it. So in that respect, it hasn't changed. But I think the offer and the model has morphed over the years, and we need to look at the model, how we've got to where we've got to at the moment, and what does it need to look for, like moving forwards, what's fit for purpose for us and for the members.
Because we've got in Caldecott, we've got the zone. Is that a sort of parallel type service, the way the zone operates in Caldecott? Because it works very well as far as I can see.
This was more about being able to form relationships and friendships. Yeah, and it might be that we are duplicating, you see. Yeah. So as Jane said, it started off 10 years ago when our service provision was very different and we didn't have the community resources that we've got now. So this is again why we need to look at the model and what have we currently got within Monmouthshire, and it is my mates duplicating that, and do we need my mates to look different for Monmouthshire?
So just to reiterate, we are working closely with our local authority colleagues because there are different services. Yeah, there are different services in their areas as well. As Claire says, things have developed and changed since it was originally started. So we are liaising with the other local authorities to find out what's in their areas and what works for them as well.
Those further 4 areas working in line with what we're trying to do, or?
Yeah, we're liaising with them now, and we've consulted with them in relation to this report and the changes that we've made. So what we've done now, we've brought the service into a place of safety, and we've rectified the issues that have been highlighted. We've got sustainable oversight now, but it is about the sustainability of the service and how that service develops in the future. So those are the conversations that we're having with our local authority colleagues.
Great. Could we go to Suan, please?
Thank you, Chair. You've highlighted collectively the actions being taken going forward, but are you satisfied that there are no safeguarding issues of an historic nature given the time that this My Mates service has been running? And indeed, if you have identified any safeguarding issues of an historic nature, how are they being addressed?
Yeah, thank you. If there were any safeguarding issues in the previously, they would have gone in via our safeguarding procedures anyway. So the staff team would have been obliged to put in a duty to report. And I have spoken to the workers, and they have assured me that if there were safeguarding issues, they would have reported it to the relevant local authority. We did pick up on other things like behaviours, and again they were reported back to each individual borough. But what we're now doing is we're recording it because obviously they're our staff, so we're asking them to report all incidents to us, and we're recording them on our database, and we're reviewing them in line with safeguarding. So if it is a safeguarding issue, it's definitely going into safeguarding. But if it's not a safeguarding issue at that threshold, then we're going to review each incident separately to see whether there are themes or issues with a particular individual that needs to be picked up.
And are you satisfied that those matters were reported? You said that people, had said that they understood that they needed to report them to the relevant authority. Did that take place? Is there any evidence that that took place?
We'd have to go to each local authority to find out how many DTRs were put in by My Mates. But we can certainly ask that question as part of the review.
Yeah, and just to add to that the staff have been trained in safeguarding, so they are aware of the procedures around safeguarding, and any issues were reported. We don't know the detail of that, but we are confident that they would have been reported appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions or comments from members, please? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so if I may move to try to summarise this item. So, as I said at the start of this, I'm very grateful that officers have attended and given a good account of the situation they found themselves in and the work they've done to both identify and address those weaknesses. I personally take some comfort from the actions already sort of taken place and the actions proposed to close down the final points. Certainly, I'm reassured that the findings as set out in the audit report have been taken seriously, and management have acted diligently and promptly to address those weaknesses. But members, over to you. Are we happy with what we've heard? Are we content? Are we happy to now let the management team progress matters as they see fit? Or do we require the further reporting or escalations to be made to, for example, the Chief Executive? Comments, please. Tony.
Is it the number of months we've got another one coming, Jan? Yeah.
Yes, there'll be an internal audit follow-up review done within the next financial year.
That sounds fine by me, Chair.
But what I've heard is that the findings as set out have been addressed by management in accordance with timescales which they've agreed to. So I hadn't heard any exceptions, which I take as a positive. Any final comments before we look to close?
Could I move we accept the recommendations?
Yep, please do so. I think I'm hearing everyone's content with that.
Happy with that, Chair.
Great. In which case, thank you for attending. It's much appreciated, and please, brilliant work from what I've heard. Fantastic. Great. Let's move on to item 6. Item 6 is the Audit Wales report on the National Fraud Initiative for the last financial year, which really talks to the update for MCC. So, Steve, I think you're introducing this item, so over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, this is very much an Audit Wales briefing paper, so it doesn't reflect work I'm personally undertaking, but it's a paper that we are taking to all audit committees of all NFI participants throughout Wales. On the 24-25, the current, that is, NFI exercise, and it sets out a bit of background information in regard to the national picture, but also importantly, an update on the volume and type of data matches which have occurred locally. So it gives you a flavour really of where we are in terms of progress and what it means for Monmouthshire. A bit of additional information, and that's not in the report, is that I've been in contact with our Audit Wales team just to get a feel for how things are progressing within Monmouthshire in terms of tackling and reviewing these data matches. And I'm pleased to say I've had really good feedback on that, both in terms of working through those matches and also in terms of identifying savings and other positive outcomes. But I'm very much aware from contacting Jan on this too, that he is bringing a report to the next committee, which will provide a summary really of the outcome of his and his team's investigations into these data matches. So this report, I guess, is very much in summary is a bit of a scene setter, if I can put it that way, and it should complement the paper that Jan will be bringing to the next committee. There's probably not a huge amount more I wish to say about this report because it's more of, as I say, a briefing paper rather than a tailored report or a totally tailored report, if that's the correct phrase, for Monmouthshire. But I'm very happy to take any questions away or answer what questions I can this afternoon.
Okay, no, thank you, Steve. Accepting, it's a briefing paper as opposed to a tailored report, so I understand the context. And you're quite right to reference Jan's report coming to our next committee meeting, which would give a bit more of a MCC flavour to this information. But for my benefit, and it's a general question, the paper talks about data matches. Just help me understand what you mean by a data match, please, in the context of a unitary authority.
Of course. This NFI has been running. I wouldn't like to say what the number of years. It's in the report, I believe, but it's been going a good time. And what it entails is we're collecting data from a huge array of public bodies, really. And they're all crunched within a computer. You can see I'm no specialist here, to identify matches, if you like, between those types of data. So, for instance, one area where the council has achieved success in identifying data matches as a result of this exercise is in result of like blue badges. Now, that I don't know the precise source for identifying those blue badge incorrectly awarded or out of date badges, but it could be matches with people who've actually deceased, unfortunately, but they still got there's still a blue badge issued, but those death data is not obviously held by the council, it's held elsewhere. But it's a case of pulling all this information together that is public bodies own and possess to identify matches and therefore potential frauds or errors that might exist within various bodies. And what happens then, those data matches then passed out to the various bodies for investigation. So there have been some which are in this report which have been passed to Monmouthshire, which I know Jan is actively working through.
Right.
That's probably a clumsy description of what a data match is, but it's basically putting various data together to identify potential fraud and errors in summary.
I understood the sentiment. Thank you. So if I've understood you correctly, if I'm looking at Exhibit 5 within the briefing paper, there are, for example, 948 very high-risk data matches for MCC. So the expectation would be that someone within MCC is doing some form of review or investigation into those very high-risk data matches and coming to some form of conclusion. Is that correct, Steve?
That is correct. It may not necessarily be a review, but there will certainly be a risk assessment and assessment of whether they require review. There'll be more detail underpinning this in terms of the information provided to the council. This is very much the tip of the iceberg that's in this report, but there should be information there to provide councils and other bodies the ability to assess and risk assess the likelihood of that match being due to fraud or error.
Okay, thank you. In which case, I'm very much looking forward to Jan's paper next month, which should talk to these items.
So apart from the fact that, I'll be bringing a paper to the next committee meeting, just a bit more context and another example of that, where we review these very high matches. So obviously on payroll, there's 19 very high matches. So the payroll to payroll reports are probably the best example of a data match. It could be an employee working for Monmouthshire Council, with also secondary employment at another local authority or within the health board. So there's nothing to preclude that employee having secondary employment. The issue would then be as if they had two employments of 37-hour contracts, of how they are able to do 37 hours in two different jobs. Now that's an example I've come across before, probably not to quite 37 hours, but a similar level. So we then contact the manager and the employee to make sure that there's no duplication in hours. So they're not working for Monmouthshire at the same time they're working for the health board. So that's the idea that we try and go through. A lot of those very high matches from doing previous years NFI work, we would already know about some of them, so we can close them off quite quickly and quite straightforwardly. There's other ones we need to investigate a bit further.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Phil, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, you more or less answer the question I was going to ask Jan, but I suppose that I can boil the question down to how much assistance has this report been to you in doing your work, or had you approached it from a different point of view?
In terms of this Audit Wales briefing paper, it's come to us probably very late in the day because we are quite a significant way through our data matches at the moment.
That was why I was asking the question.
I don't think it would necessarily have changed how we went about doing those data matches. As Steve said, we do an independent risk assessment of how we want to go by through our data matches. Obviously, we start at the very high risk ones and then move our way down. So I don't think this report would have necessarily have changed how we went about the exercise, to be honest. But it's more information for committee of what NFI is, and there is also a separate review that's just about to be started by Audit Wales over NFI, leading into their next annual or biannual report. So that's going to be commencing over the next couple of weeks. So we've got interviews with Audit Wales for that.
thank you. Steve?
Yeah, it's just to add to that, really, Councillor, that this paper wasn't really intended to shape the work Jan and other audited bodies are doing. It's more of a briefing paper for audit committees, really, to keep committee members abreast and informed of NFI. So it's supposed to shine a spotlight on it, really, more so than we have done in prior years. Because it is a useful exercise. It's not just useful to the council, obviously. There's data match. The council submit data, whichever bodies are using to identify fraud and error in their own bodies. So it's the whole Welsh public sector that benefit really from the NFI exercise. So it's an important piece of work. So, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I think we can note a briefing paper. Thank you, Steve. In which case, let's move on to item 7. Item 7 is the counter fraud risk assessment, and so I'll hand over to Jan to introduce the item, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so fraud is considered a significant risk to the public sector, and various estimates have been made as to the total loss to the public purse. However, it's clear that financial losses due to fraud divert funds from essential services and may result in reputational damage and a loss of confidence. Monmouthshire County Council has a zero tolerance culture and attitude towards fraud, bribery and corruption. And in accordance with the Council's risk appetite status, we are risk averse when it comes to these areas. This risk assessment is designed to safeguard the resources and reputation of the Council, complementing our anti-fraud, corruption and bribery policy, which was last approved by Cabinet in January 24. So fairly recently, Audit Wales completed a review of the Council's counter-fraud arrangements. That was completed in March 25, and that found that the Council had recently strengthened its counter-fraud arrangements, but recognised that there were further steps it could take. 2 recommendations were issued, and the current position of those are included within the revised risk assessment. In addition to the completion of the risk assessment, as part of the restructure of the internal audit team in April 24, it was agreed that a counter-fraud officer position would be added to the structure. So that has been recruited to, and the post holder commenced in January 25. So that forms another part of our anti-fraud response. An e-learning module covering fraud, corruption and bribery has been developed via the Council's Think e-learning management system. That's been deemed necessary. The course has been deemed mandatory for all members and officers of the Council. So the completion of the module has been monitored and reported through the senior leadership team at various points of the year. So completion statistics have been included within the risk assessment. However, it's pleasing to report that since that document was written, the completion rates have since significantly improved. So they now stand at law and governance are at 100%, chief executive's area at 97.5%, resources 94%, learning skills and economy 85%, social care and safeguarding 84%, infrastructure 71%, 71.8%, and place and community wellbeing 71.6%. So all service areas are now over 71% completion.
I'm sorry, the final row in that table is quite concerning, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry. And the last area was members, which currently stand at 36.5%. So the level of member training is due to be reviewed shortly, and discussion held with the Democratic Services team to ensure this and other training deemed essential to the member role has been completed.
Thank you. Can I ask you to pause there? Roger, you want to come in at that point, please?
I was just wondering in terms of the members specifically, because I was going to ask a question around that in terms of utilising the political leaders, and actually in your role as the audit manager, writing to them and asking them to ensure compliance as a political group, across each of the political groups.
Yeah, of course, and that is one of the areas that is being considered at the moment. I think it's getting access onto making sure members have all got access onto the learning management system is the first protocol, and then we'll look for making sure the rollout has been completed.
I've done mine.
No problem. Yeah, so in addition, work is being undertaken with the training team alongside senior officers responsible for frontline services who have a difficulty in accessing online training. So I think it's really good that those areas now are at 71%. So they were quite lagging when the first report was presented to committee. when the last statistics. So they are moving along quite fast. So arrangements are being made to allow them to undergo this training alongside any other essential and mandatory courses which they need to attend. And in addition, the rollout to school-based staff will look to commence during the latter part of the 25-26 year as the Thinky system is rolled out across schools. So the fraud risk assessment has identified the key areas of potential fraud and the mitigations in place to reduce these risks. They're included within the fraud risk register as detailed within Appendix 1. As we've already mentioned through the earlier agenda items, the Monmouthshire Council continues to take an active role in the National Fraud Initiative, conducting investigations and recording outcomes where necessary. And to confirm that the Council and its strategic leadership team are fully committed to the NFI process, and a report will be presented to the next committee meeting. The Audit Wales National Fraud Initiative self-assessment checklist has also been completed, and that's included within Appendix 2. And we do have an action plan in place, which is Appendix 4, to help improve Monmouthshire Council's response to fraud, corruption and bribery. So therefore I ask that the Governance and Audit Committee comments on and endorses our counter-fraud risk assessment, and that the committee receive an updated report during the next financial year.
Thank you. Questions or comments, please? Rodri.
Thanks, Chair. It was just that frustration sometimes around the use of language, because we talk zero tolerance, culture and attitude, and I don't think that's really reflected in the take-up of the mandatory training on that's highlighted within the report. So I was just wondering what more can be done in order to drive compliance, because presumably the lessons learned from that then could also be utilised when you roll it out to schools to ensure that they are also compliant.
Yeah, so in terms of the compliance area, so I think it's the area that we are struggling with is the non-computer based members of staff within the council. So it's the harder to reach areas. So that's where we're looking at the moment. We've got a specific target in place to get those members of staff through the course. So whether that's providing laptops for them to be able to do it before their shift, or to have a member of the training team go out there and have a run through of the module with them. With the school-based staff, hopefully, well, they should all have devices and they should be au fait to using it. So we wouldn't imagine there to be that much difficulty with that rollout, but that's something that we will have to monitor throughout.
Chair, can I just ask a question of elected members a minute? I just got something in the back of my mind and I'm not sure if I'm right or not. Am I right in thinking that at one stage there was some confusion over whether members had to do these courses on thingy or not? And I think John Pearson said that he would let us know when we had to. And I'm just wondering if that's the reason why we've only got 34%. I might be completely wrong. It's just something that occurred to me as the discussion was going on. I don't know whether anybody else can remember that, or as I say, perhaps I'm dreaming it or something.
I think we all had to do it.
I have no memory of that, but that's no indication that it didn't actually happen. I think what tends to happen is we have had, particularly in the early stages, a lot of training, and sometimes it's difficult to remember, did I do that module? Do I know that because I did that particular module? Or was it in the induction or whatever? I think picking up on Rodri, I think the first step is a reminder, an individual reminder to anybody who hasn't done the module that they do need to do it. Because I'm not sure where I would check if I've done it or not, to be honest.
Well, it was subsequent to the induction training. So perhaps I'm getting mixed up with something else, but it'll be worth asking Democratic Services to have a look anyway.
Yeah, so I think there has been a bit of confusion with that in terms of its training that Monmouthshire Council has deemed to be mandatory for its members. It's not a mandatory course as stipulated by Welsh Government and the WLGA. So I think that was the difference. Obviously, good governance would be that all members would get that course done, regardless of the fact that it's not a statutory requirement of part of your role. So that's what we're just trying to iron out. And as I mentioned, we'll have discussion with John to make sure that's rolled out across members.
Okay, thank you. Could I go to Sue-Ann, please?
Just following up on the conversation we were having just now about the training percentages for people in different areas. So noting some of the areas where action has had to be taken. Are we satisfied that people undertaking roles like contract management and others have been, sufficiently trained? So maybe it's not necessarily in the service area that they work, it's the kind of role that they perform. So is that something that, you are confident, even though the percentages might not have reached 100, that the actual people involved in the risky work have undertaken the training?
Yeah, excellent point. So one of the first things we did was to concentrate on heads of service, chief officers, service managers, to make sure that regardless of the percentages, that those identified posts had been gone through the training. Obviously, the majority of those employees would be in the resources, the chief executives area, which are obviously at significantly high percentages anyway at the moment. And they would never quite get to 100%. Obviously, law and governance say something different, but we'll generally always have members of staff either on maternity leave or absent from work for various different reasons, or just change over a member of staff and the delays between the two. So it's going to be quite difficult for us to get up to 100%, but we're definitely on the way forward. But we are trying to target individuals as we see them.
Thank you. A question from me, and it's a very broad question initially at least. So within the document you have the fraud risk assessment. It appears to be quite long, quite detailed. What do you do with this information? How does it help inform you?
So the fraud risk assessment is there so we can identify what areas that we potentially could cover as part of either internal audit reviews or work completed by our counter-fraud officer. So certain areas that we are looking at as part of that fraud risk assessment. So we've got, let me just find them. So we've got like finance areas with duplicate invoices, so that we will be doing, as part of our audit work, making sure that we've covered that area off. There's an element in there for bribery, kickbacks for procurement and collusion. So we do consider that. We've had some investigations this financial year under the Bribery Act. So that helps inform the areas that we need to look at and we need to put some more resource into.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. So I understand how this drives activity from a third line of assurance perspective. I get it. What accountability do these first line, for example, risk owners have when they have this information about what a fraud risk assessment says? Do they have any obligation then to make improvements to their systems of control independently of the reviews you do?
So it's up for the individual risk owners to consider what the control measures that they've got in place and to make sure they're sufficient for the action. If there is anything that changes during the course of the year, to update those control measures, which wouldn't necessarily be picked up as part of this document because that needs to be done on a live basis, and to ensure that appropriate controls are in place across the council.
Okay, on the face of it, so if I take this at face value, you have some residual risk levels which appear to be well above tolerance, especially as you made remarks in the opening section, but you have a zero tolerance to fraud. So I'm just somewhat unsure in terms of what risk owners are doing about with this information, how useful it is in terms of informing their work to further improve controls. No need to answer this, particularly one too, but I think there's, for me, maybe more onus on first line to take action rather than be sort of wholly reliant upon you and the fraud risk manager. Good. Are there any other comments before we move on? In which case, I think we can note this fraud risk assessment and look forward to future updates. Next agenda item is item 10. Item 10 is an update on the implementation and self-assessment of the global internal audit standards. So I think it's back to you, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report informs the Governance and Audit Committee of Monmouthshire County Council about our outcomes for the updated self-assessment of the internal audit team's compliance with the global internal audit standards. These became mandatory for the UK public sector in April of this year, and they supersede the previous public sector internal audit standards, which had been in place since April 2013. So under the previous public sector standards, the audit team underwent an external quality assessment for compliance in March 24, and we achieved the highest rating of generally compliant. So on the basis of that, our next external quality assessment is not due until March 2029, and discussions are ongoing at the Welsh Chief Auditor's level as to how we go about doing that across Wales at the moment. So the new global standards introduced new standards and requirements, including a formal internal audit mandate, a strategy and an updated charter. So those documents were reviewed and approved by the Audit Committee in June 25. So the self-assessment used the toolkit as provided by the Global Institute of Internal Auditors, which has been adapted for the UK public sector by the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors UK and Ireland. The initial assessment was completed in March 25, just prior to the standards becoming effective, and a mid-year reassessment completed in September this year. So overall, our overall compliance was that the internal audit function is largely compliant with the new standards, with most domains and principles being assessed as either fully achieved or generally achieved. So as I mentioned, our mandate, charter and methodologies have been formally adopted, and all documents are now in use. The one area where there was a level of non-compliance was under the ethics and professionalism area, where we were only generally achieved. That's not to say that there wasn't good ethics and good professionalism occurring, but one of the areas of the global internal audit standards was formal training regarding ethics, professional skepticism and root cause analysis. So those areas, and also including honesty and professional courage, the internal audit team undertook formal training earlier on this month, along with a number of other internal audit teams across South Wales, so that we can all assure that we have met those requirements. So they would, if we redid the self-assessment today, they would now be fully achieved. So annual reporting, my overall audit opinion and conclusion to Audit Committee and our quality assurance programme is all fully achieved within the self-assessment, and our quality assurance and improvement programme is in place and is effective. So as part of our outstanding actions to ensure full compliance, so the professional skepticism training, as I mentioned, that's now been completed. We're going to look to get a training plan together for the entire internal audit team, so a comprehensive training plan for mandatory CPD and ethics training. So as a chartered internal auditor, we're required to report 40 hours of continuing professional development to the Institute every year, which must include a minimum of 2 hours of ethics training. So we're going to get that training plan in place by the end of this calendar year, with a view to obviously starting training from the new financial year, and look to review the effectiveness of our new internal audit methodologies by the end of the year, because obviously they came in and they would have been in place a year by that date. So the report looks to provide assurance that we are compliant with the new international standards, that the audit function remains robust, transparent and fit for purpose. We are looking to address any issues for improvement, and we look to support continuous development, and the committee's oversight and support are crucial for maintaining our high standards and effective internal audit governance. So I ask committee to note the self-assessment and the action plan, and that an update report will be provided next financial year.
Great, thank you. Questions and comments? Go to Phil first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Clearly, the fact that so much of this is fully achieved you start to wonder why you've got a couple of bits which are generally achieved. And there's one in particular that surprises me, given the level of full achievement, is the assessment of Principle 4 in Appendix 1, where it says internal auditors apply due professional care in planning and performing internal audit services. I would have thought that you had more than generally achieved that. So why have you marked yourself down?
So that one relates partly to the professional skepticism root cause analysis. Yep, it's in a number of different areas of the standards, unfortunately. So that would have been one of the areas that we needed to address, and likewise with the training plan as well.
Okay, that question was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but nevertheless.
Tony.
Well, my question is virtually the same as Phil's, but really, what is generally achieved? What is the measurement of generally achieved?
Yeah, those... it's not my terminology, it's the terminology from the global internal auditors. So yes, we've got generally achieved, fully achieved. I can't even remember what the other ones were because we didn't have any of them. But yeah, I think there was a percentage kind of rating that whoever did the self-assessment would have to say where they thought they were with it. And obviously when we do have our external quality assessment, they will be reviewing this document then to make sure that they agree with what basis that we've put in there and whether it is fully or partially achieved.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so start with a question from me and then I'll look to hopefully sum up. Turning to Appendix 4 of the action plan, I note the reference to CPD, and clearly and I'm sure this committee supports the need for all members of your team to undertake sufficient CPD. You make a reference to being budget dependent. Could you just say a few more words about what the concern is there, if indeed it is a concern?
So where I refer to budget dependent, for those staff within my team are not yet qualified at certified internal auditor level, the qualification is quite expensive in terms of both costs for the actual courses, the examination fees, the registration fees, and then the time to be able to release those members of staff. Is quite a long program as well. So I think there's 4 different modules, 4 different exams to be able to pass for that qualification. So it is budgetary dependent. There wouldn't be enough budget within a particular financial year within our audit budget to have these 2 members of staff be able to do the entire program, both within a single calendar year. So that's what we need to just work through. And that's what I mean by it's budget dependent of when we can organise the examinations and the actual modules to be undertaken.
I think you can guess my follow-up remark. I would encourage you and Peter Davis to ensure that you have sufficient budget to ensure that in your professional judgment all staff achieve a suitable level of professional sort of competence. I would be disappointed if the budget constraints unduly got in the way. So could I ask you to take that away and have a discussion with Peter Davis and others to ensure that the budget is sufficient for your needs?
Yep, happy to do that, Chair.
Okay, if I look to sum this item up, it's quite easy. We're in a very good place. I take real comfort from the fact that we have a highly competent audit team who not only appear, but I am assured are doing an excellent job in terms of reviewing the quality of internal control right across the authority. So it's imperative that this committee, as Jan has alluded to, continues to provide support, guidance to that internal audit team and the chief internal auditor in particular to ensure that they continue to do a highly diligent and highly valuable job. and that their sort of team members are given sufficient opportunity to grow in expertise and competence within this authority. That's essential. And yet again, I would just encourage Jan and the wider team to take every opportunity that's available to them. So we can safely note this very helpful paper. Right. If you can move on to item 11. Item 11 is the Health and Safety Annual Report. I see Kate Thompson there waiting patiently for quite some time now for her item to come along. So could I welcome Kate Thompson, our Corporate Health and Safety Manager, to the meeting. It's much appreciated for you taking the time to join us. Please assume we've read your very insightful report, but nonetheless, please introduce the item and highlight points of note.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present this annual health and safety report. I'm aware that this is the first health and safety report that you've been asked to consider. And just to give it a little bit of reason why it's before you. So it has been brought to my attention, but well, first of all, the report's been brought to your attention as part of our commitment to robust governance and transparency in managing organisational risk. Health and safety at work is a critical area of operational risk. Getting it wrong can have serious consequences, both for individuals and for the organisation. And the report provides an overview of activities, key incidents and improvement initiatives. The report also supports this committee's oversight role by highlighting the work that we're doing to mitigate health and safety risks across the organisation. The data and insights within the report are intended to inform strategic decision making and ensure that our risk controls remain effective and proportionate. I think it's important for me to point out from a corporate health and safety perspective that we are on a journey. Over the last 12 months, we've been laying the foundations to move from being an almost solely reactive resource for the authority to one which is also proactive. And having robust governance arrangements in place is key to our success. Positive news is that we, as an organisation, we've got some areas, real areas of strength, and you'll see these highlighted in the report. But we also recognise that we've got areas where we need to make improvements. You'll note, if you look at the accidents and incidents during the year, that there were only 16 that were serious enough to require reporting to the Health and Safety Executive, who are our regulator in this area. And 10 of those were reported only by virtue of the fact that they resulted in more than 7 days absence. But from my perspective, 16 work-related accidents is 16 too many. And what I can say is that we are a learning organisation and that we've got robust arrangements in place to ensure that where serious incidents do occur, we investigate to identify contributory factors and root causes. And we also ensure, as far as reasonably possible, we put things in place to prevent a recurrence. So one of the current challenges that you would have seen in the report is our inability as an organisation to reliably report sickness absence, which is work-related. And by this, I mean identifying cases of sickness where work has been the cause of their absence. And I'm working with our HR colleagues and systems and data colleagues to ensure going forward we're able to reliably report this key information. And it's important because it'll help us to identify and target interventions to support colleagues. You'll note one of our commitments this year is to prioritise the development of a risk-based, more consistent and robust approach to health and safety monitoring and assurance from across all directorates. And there is another report for your consideration today from Audit colleagues setting out their findings of their audit of landlord and commercial services building compliance function. And this is going to be really important, an important consideration in informing our approach going forward. Linking that report with this report, I just think it's important to point out that from a corporate health and safety perspective, you'll note that one of the priorities identified for this year is to complete a review of the Council's all of the Council's health and safety policies. And this includes reviewing our buildings-related health and safety policies. So on a positive note, last month, JAG endorsed a new management of asbestos policy for the Council. We're currently working on policies relating to the the management of water systems in our buildings to prevent Legionella, and fire safety policies, which are currently in draft for consultation. So I look forward to your feedback on the report, which will help to inform future reports, and to receiving your endorsement for the priorities identified for the current year on page 31 in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. Very helpful summary. If we could go to members for questions or comments, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a very interesting report here, and as always, when you get sort of figures and that sort of thing, they tend to raise other questions, and in particular, I'm really asking in two separate fields here, but they're both really about what sort of information you hold. First of all, the increase in violence in schools. At the face of it, at least, and probably in reality, a fairly alarming increase there based on that NASUWT report. But what I'm asking here is do we have independent figures for Monmouthshire to allow us to make comparisons? Do we have a breakdown between primary and secondary schools to indicate if there's a degree of change in one more than the other? And sort of following on from that, do we have figures that would indicate the continuing impact of COVID? Is that impact going down or is it going up? Is it having an effect as year groups from that COVID years move in from primary into secondary, for example? Do we have the sort of figures for that, or do we have to rely on, well, what we might call qualitative data, which we might just call anecdotal? And similarly with the sickness figures, we have figures for directorates and different types of sickness, but do you hold more breakdowns on that? For example, the figures for stress, is that a lot of people for fairly short periods, or is it a very few people for very long periods? That sort of thing. And I guess there's different patterns of sickness for different types of work. If you're working from home and you've got a heavy cold, you might well struggle on. If you're working in front line, dealing especially with people with health vulnerabilities, probably not a good idea to be working when you've got a heavy cold. So I'm not really so much asking the answers to all those questions, but I'm asking, do you have the sort of figures and the breakdown of figures that would allow you to answer those questions? Because after all, the point of having figures is to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, and a few different questions and some really good questions there. So, first of all, if we thinking about schools, violence and aggression in schools. So, I think from the report you will have seen, and I think it's been in national media as well, and local media, that incidents of violence and aggression in schools is really increasing. We've seen a real increase, actually, and that's across the board. That's not just in Monmouthshire. In Monmouthshire, we are being told that those incidents are increasing as well. So what I can say is that we have systems in place to capture that data in Monmouthshire, but what I would say is historically there's been sort of huge underreporting, and you'll see that in the report we really are getting to grips with this now in terms of our engagement with schools and schools' engagement with us to actually make sure that they are reporting these incidents, and what we're seeing is a much better engagement with the process of reporting. So my answer to you, Peter, is yes, we do have data that is specific to Monmouthshire on violence in schools. I would say that looking at trends, because of the huge underreporting and quite a number of schools that never reported those incidents, I think, there's a very limited value in doing any kind of comparison. But now we are getting, most schools are reporting, and we do have that data, and we do have a breakdown of that data by individual school. One of your questions was whether that was primary or secondary. Yes, and we do actually provide that data. We have with HR colleagues regularly to trade unions who are interested in it, clearly. So Yes, one of our areas we've recognised for improvement is to get better engagement with that reporting process and to make that reporting process easier and more accessible to staff, because that's been a little bit of an issue over the last 2 years, if I'm honest. The system for staff that have email and have access has been really easy. The system is a digital system, but it's been more of a challenge for schools. In terms of sickness data, that sickness data is held in HR, and what I would say is that data is available at a very granular level. So, not only by directorate, but breakdowns in long-term and short-term. That data, again, all held locally at a very granular level. However, my issue and my concern, what I'm interested in, is that absence which is work related, particularly around psychological absence, because you will see in the report, there's been a startling increase in sickness absence that's sort of psychological illness. So that could be depression, anxiety, it could be work-related stress, it could be non-work-related stress. And what I'm interested in as the health and safety lead for the authority is identifying that with all of that illness, including psychological illness, which is work-related, because there are interventions that we can use to try and reduce those levels of sickness, but we need to be able to effectively target those interventions in the right place. So yes, the answer to your questions, Peter, are largely yes, yes, and yes. And we're on a journey. And just giving you an example, on sickness, the directorate with the highest level of sickness at the moment, actually, Jen was here earlier. I'm going to be attending with HR their directorate DMT over the next few weeks just to talk about this data. And HR are going to provide a very granular insight into where the issues are, and we can start talking about interventions that we can use to try and help.
Thank you, Kate. Peter, did you want to come back at all?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm very pleased to hear the use of words like targeting and interventions, which really highlights what the purpose of those collection of figures is in the first place. So that's very good. Particularly pleased as well that there's greater engagement from schools over issues of violence. Having been in a past life a caseworker with the NUT voluntary, I was aware of some schools that were very reluctant to report incidents of violence because they feared the reputational damage to the school and pupil roles and so on. I'm pleased to hear that's better now, but that needs continuous work to make sure there's absolute transparency in that field. Thank you.
Thank you. Rodri.
Thanks, Chair. I think there's a lot of positives, in the achievements in the progress update, for a small team, and it's welcome how much of it appears to be really proactive. I was just curious. There's a couple of mentions of pilots, especially around schools and checklists. I was just wondering how successful those initiatives have been, and are they therefore being rolled out across the county?
Thanks, another really good question. So up until January this year, corporate health and safety was a team of one. So that was myself, and that's why, it's been reactive. And now you'll see from the report, I think there's been a recognition that's needed, a little bit of investment. So we have recruited somebody to look after health and safety in schools, because it was taking up quite an enormous amount of my time. So there are two sort of audit methodologies that we've developed over the last few months. And the first one is around traffic management on schools and how we can better ensure pupil safety at drop-off and pick-up time. It's a huge issue, probably across almost all of our schools. But there's one particular school where during an ESTIN inspection, they picked this up and they wrote specifically to us or to Will directly on that issue. So that was at the end of the summer term. So the first week, so over the summer, we developed developed an audit methodology for us to go in and look at that a little bit independently and provide the head teacher with some support. So we've developed a sort of an audit framework for that, which we've piloted now in 2 schools, and we would be very happy to roll it out across further schools. But at the moment we don't have a plan to do that. So that resource, if you like, that sort of audit sort of template is there, and if we get requests, then we will go in and do that review and produce a report. I think part of the function for us this year is to have a look at how much auditing we actually do as a team. Like I say, there are 3 of us, and I'm really, really grateful to Jan, because as part of Jan's audits, more general audits, Jan's team do pick up on health and safety issues, and quite often I do get a call from our audit team for clarification on matters. And this year, for the first time, Jan's keeping on the issue of schools, the audit checklist that Jan sends out to schools for them to do a self-assessment, we're including in that a tab, if you like, on that spreadsheet for health and safety. So what it'll mean is, for our approach for schools going forward, is that they'll be able to do their own health and safety self-assessment. They'll be able to, if you like, almost score themselves in terms of where they are, looking at what the expectation is. But it'll also help us to identify areas where schools might need more support as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Can I just check with Tony? Did you want to come in?
Thank you very much, and welcome as a health and safety manager. That was my forte in the steel industry for a long time. That's very important in the steel industry. I noticed a good report, and one particularly, an employee tripped off the edge of a pavement. He was told to take care. Okay, I understand that. What do you believe your role is in conjunction with the health and safety executive? Do you feel you should have a lot of influence with them? Or not influence, a lot of discussion with them, and I suppose influence at the end of the day? Because I got particular concerns that the health and safety executive seem to be above what we want as an authority, or other people want as an authority.
Yeah, and that's another great question.
I got a problem for you after that then.
Yeah, so my background is as a regulator. So and I've in previous roles, I've worked very closely with the health and safety executive, albeit in a very different capacity. I am now the regulated, not the regulator, and it is a very different role. So in terms of our relationship as an authority with the health and safety executive, I would say we have a good relationship. We don't see a lot of them. We don't see a lot of them. But when they do turn up, then obviously we take that very, very seriously. I would say that one of the things. We have a good relationship with them. There's not enough. They don't have enough resource to, they have training resource. It's too expensive for us to access. For example, they run training courses for £500-600 a day. They don't run them in Wales. They run them in Buxton, in Derby. Not accessible. And I have, that's something that it's my intention to write to them about that, because it is difficult to engage with them when there's those kind of barriers. What I would say is, when I've needed advice from the health and safety executive, whenever I've needed advice, I've been able to access them. And of course, we have engagement with them when we report incidents as well. So, they don't always acknowledge incidents that we report to them, but just last week we had an email from them about an incident that we reported, and there'll usually be some kind of discussion, and that will inform whether they're going to come in and look at it. We've been very lucky. We haven't had that much attention from them as a regulator, touch wood, over the past, certainly the 2 years that I've been here. But I would say, whenever we do, that we actually welcome that interaction.
I think they're very good at passing the ball around and not picking it up at the end of the day. I got a particular problem which I'll be bringing to you and Craig in the future. You won't mention it today.
Okay, any other questions or comments from members, please? Phil?
Yeah, just a quick one. Back in the old days of Dave Jones and Lawrence Dawkins, I've gone back quite a long way, haven't I? We used to have, because health and safety was within my portfolio when I was in the cabinet, we used to have quite regular health and safety meetings, and we used to have a rep from each department basically that came, and we'd have a really good look at everything from the type of chair they were sat in to why they were off with stress and all that sort of. There's still a lot of people off with stress, aren't there? But do those meetings still take place? Because personally, I found them extremely useful.
Yeah, another good question. So the answer is yes. Well, yes. So one of the things that we've been working on is having a robust corporate health and safety group. So we have a corporate health and safety group that meets quarterly, and there's representation on that from all directorates actually. Trade unions are represented on there. Our insurance lead sits on there. Colleagues from training sit on that group, and then underneath that corporate health and safety group, there are directorate health and safety groups. So every directorate now has identified a health and safety lead that can feed into the corporate health and safety group. And I attend those directorate health and safety meetings. So in terms of the structures that we have in place for communication around health and safety, they're good and they're strengthening, and coming to this committee today strengthens it even further. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that those health and safety meetings are largely taking place. The only area which would, and we'll put arrangements in place, is our sort of central services. There wasn't a separate, if you like, health and safety group, but that we have the first meeting of that group at the end of this month, end of November actually. But other directorates, particularly those higher risk, what was Mon Life, the sort of more visible services, health and social care, they have very active health and safety groups.
Thank you. Rodri.
Thanks, Chair. In the risk register, there's multiple mentions of e-learning and training for managers, and there's various deadlines of like October, November, and September, October, and December this year. I was just wondering, are they all where they were supposed to be completed? Have they been completed? And are you on track for the ones due to be completed in December?
Yeah, so another good question. So I've been spending quite a lot of time developing e-learning over the last few months. And I would say, yes, we are on track. However, I do my development work in PowerPoint. And there is a job of work to be done, because our learning management system, Thinky, you can't put PowerPoint on there. So what happens is I hand over the material that I've developed. I will be handing that over to our training team, and then they'll be putting it into a format that can go on to Thinky. Yeah. We've already done it for fire safety awareness, and but there are so many other areas that we need to get onto the system.
Thank you. Are there any final questions or comments before we look to move on? No? Okay, so to reiterate, thank you, Kate, for attending. I thought your report was excellent, and judging by the comments, so do my colleagues. So thank you for what's an excellent report. It is packed full of very interesting metrics. And the metrics which stood out for me were on page 26 in respect of insurance claims. And I was pleasantly surprised by how low the volume and value of those claims were, both for employer liability and public liability. So clearly, we do take health and safety very seriously. Back to the asks of this committee. You've asked us to consider the report, which we have done. We provided some feedback. Peter provided feedback in particular in terms of metrics to really contextualise some information. And we've looked at the risk register, and you pointed us towards the health and safety priorities for this year. And those priorities to me look very reasonable. So may I, in conclusion, say thank you for your report, and may you continue the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on, please, to item 12. Item 12 is the Internal Audit Quarterly Progress Report for Q2. And over to you again, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report is to consider the adequacy of the internal control environment within the Council based on the outcomes of our audit reviews and opinions issued to the 30th of September 25. So that's the performance of the internal audit team over the first 6 months of the current financial year. So since the start of the financial year, the team have completed 20 audit jobs to at least draft stage from its 25-26 operational plan, 10 of those being opinion related, and those opinions are shown in the table at Appendix 1. So specifically during the second quarter, there were 5 opinion related jobs issued. So that's Education Welfare Service, which received substantial assurance, Digital Projects and the Museum Service, both with reasonable assurance, the Housing Support Grant, which was unqualified, and the 5th one was Health and Safety Building Compliance, which did receive the limited assurance opinion. So that review, so the findings from the Health and Safety Building Compliance report are included within Appendix 4 to my report. It's pleasing to report that since the report was issued, the findings from the review have been accepted by management and positive changes have already taken place within the area concerned. It's been explained to the auditor that appropriate checks had actually been completed during the compliance visits, but they had not always been recorded or included within the visit outcome reports, which obviously we looked at as part of the audit review. So other audit work in line with the audit plan has started and site visits undertaken for a number of establishments. So at the end of quarter 2, 52% of the audit plan had been deemed to either been started or in progress. 5 special investigations or reactive pieces of work commenced during the second quarter. And at the end of that quarter, all of those remained under investigation. So there was a bribery allegation within the infrastructure service area, an employee investigation in learning skills and economy, an employee investigation in social care, safeguarding and health, another employee investigation in infrastructure, and a cross-cutting review which was proactive across all overtime paid across the council. In addition, 1 investigation was open from the previous financial year within social care, and that had been completed at the end of the quarter and a disciplinary hearing held. So Appendix 3 of my report gives the details of the section's performance indicators as of the 30th of September, and as of that date, that 30% of the audit plan had been completed, which was on the profile target. So where any unfavourable audit opinions have been issued, they're followed up generally within a 12-month timescale to ensure the agreed actions have been taken on board by management and the internal controls improved. So a number of follow-up reviews commenced during the second quarter. They hadn't been issued as draft at the end of the quarter, and the work with those is still ongoing. So the outcome of those reviews, and hopefully a more favourable conclusion, will be reported to the committee in due course. As I've mentioned previously, the amount of follow-up reviews programmed to be completed during quarter 3 and especially quarter 4 of this year is very challenging. So myself and the audit management team need to plan workloads effectively to ensure as much of those can be completed within the year as is possible. So yeah, happy to answer any questions on the report.
Thank you for that. So questions or comments, please? Phil.
Yeah, as we've got the head of landlord services with us, can I just go back to that limited assurance on building compliance? Can you expand on that a bit, either you, Jan, or Nick? Why did we end up with a limited assurance?
Yeah, so the internal audit review looked at the health and safety building compliance team. So it's important to note that the team was established itself in 2021. So it hasn't been around for all that long of a time. And obviously back then we had COVID to deal with as well. So the review found that some of the sites that we would have expected the compliance officers to have visited hadn't been visited. As I mentioned, that I think a lot of it was due to the way that items were reported, in that the compliance team have told us that they did a number of the checks and that they raised a number of the concerns, but that wasn't always written down within their visit reports. And if we didn't have the evidence to be able to conclude that as part of the audit, we had to say it wasn't there. Obviously, there was 2 critical weaknesses that have been raised within the report. So in terms of the lift inspections being overdue, that is being dealt with. Those particular lifts have since been isolated. So that is work ongoing. But to confirm that the property services team have assured us that the regular lift inspections had taken place for those reviews. It was regarding a particular inspection certificate that wasn't in place. So, like I said, those lifts have now been addressed. And the gas safety... Yeah. And the gas safety checks. So it's good to note that the compliance officers identified potential gas incidents out at the site during their visits. The issue is that although the remedial action was taken immediately for those particular areas, that wasn't always reported into senior management. So if there was any potential links or areas of concern that management might have known about, that wasn't reported in. So it's commendable to the team that they were identifying the issues and that the action was taken immediately. We're just looking at that reporting aspect of it, which obviously does raise concern for the council.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. You mentioned this a few times, and I have to confess that I still don't quite understand the point you're making. You talk about the lifts being isolated. Could you just explain what you mean, please?
But Chair, if it'd be helpful, possibly to come in on this. Nick, he's head of landlord services. So yeah, just to clarify on the lifts, all of the lifts that we have within the council's ownership are serviced and maintained, so they're all safe. However, in order to operate the lift, they require a LOLA inspection, which is relating to insurance requirements for the operation of that lift. What was identified as part of the audit is that we had a number of lifts that the inspection had not been undertaken in that year. I won't speak to issues of the insurer as to perhaps difficulty why that had happened, but to confirm, all of those lifts are not operational anyway, so they are decommissioned spaces or areas that were not being used. I think what the audit has helpfully identified is that perhaps as a result of an inspection, perhaps on a particular day, a lift wasn't accessible, for example, and then it wasn't communicated back to insurance or to ourselves that inspection did not take place. I'm pleased to say of the lifts that were identified, a number of them have since been inspected, so we have been able to correct that. But in terms of risk, clearly the lifts are being serviced, they're all maintained. The risk is related to an insurance obligation to actually operate them.
Thank you, helpful. Any other questions? Rodri?
Thanks, Chair. I was intrigued by something Jan said just then. In terms of point 104, it says the purpose of the compliance team, its remit and responsibilities were not formally documented. But you just said that the team was only established 3 or 4 years ago. Could you just talk a little bit around that, so I understand it?
Yeah, so the team was effectively created on the back of a previous unfavourable internal audit review that happened a few years ago. So its remit and responsibilities were there. There was a document that very briefly overseen some of the areas that they would look at, but that particular issue was making sure that the ownership of each particular area is clear. So both for what is the responsibility of the compliance team, what is the responsibility of the site management team, what is the responsibility of corporate health and safety, and to make sure that those links and that golden thread between all those 3 areas is being managed effectively, so that a site manager knows that is my responsibility. I've got to go and do that every day or every week or every month, and then the compliance team would go over and check. So we were saying that it's making sure that what the compliance officers did on site was documented. Everybody knew what they were doing, what to expect.
Okay, thank you. Any more, please? No, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So thank you for the report, Jan. I think we could note the Q2 update. Let's move on to item 13. Item 13 is the committee's forward work plan. You will note that we have quite a busy agenda in November, quite a few meaty reports coming to us. Just for the committee's attention, I do note that there's a new item being introduced in the last couple of weeks, and that's in respect to the panel performance assessment report coming to this committee. And you'll be aware that the authority is due its panel performance assessment next year, as which is a complemented own annual self-assessment process. So look forward to that report and the performance assessment itself. Okay, well, we will. Okay, item 14 is the minutes of the last meeting. Yet again, thank you, Wendy, for not only an excellent set of minutes, but publishing them very, very quickly. I'm content with minutes. I'm not looking to go to a vote, but please, if you have points of factual accuracy, please make your points known now. No? Okay, I'm moving to a final item, item 15. Just a note for the date for the next meeting. Next meeting is on the 27th of November. With that, may I thank you one and all for your attendance and your contribution, and I now declare the meeting closed.